I don't have to be by that, I don't think so. Let's have a prayer. Father, thank you very much for this church. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for blessing deaf people all over the world as they learn about Christ. Help us in this workshop to learn things and challenge ourselves to improve our work. Help us to love you, love the deaf, and love studying your word. Bless us this morning in this class as we think about how we can encourage other people, how we can encourage ourselves to begin to work from beginning. The word they use here is from scratch, from nothing, just beginning a new work with the deaf. Thank you for hearing us. Use us for good this morning. We praise you and thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. First, I want to say I have a short outline, but I don't want to give it to you now and you read it and go home. So I'm going to hold it, and afterwards, I'll have in a folder and a pass out. I think I have enough for all of you to take one. That way, if you go to sleep, you still can remember my lesson. I'm thankful to this church for willingness of one deaf person to invite the National Deaf Workshop. Awesome team, awesome people, good church, good preaching, a good song leading, and just beautiful worship yesterday. All of you participated in that. So we know this is the church that loves Jesus, and we want to praise them and thank them for this opportunity to come east for a workshop after many years of not having one in the east. Amos, the prophet, he says, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a son of a prophet. But God told me to come and preach. Same way, I've never begun a church from scratch. My father never began deaf work from scratch. But I have been involved with the deaf work full time since 1958. I preached in the church in Indianapolis, and there I learned a lot about deafness. And I preached in California for 20 years. And there we saw the church grow. And I've traveled and visited many, many churches. And then I'm beginning my 35th year as a teacher of deaf preacher. So maybe this church knew something about me that I didn't know myself. They asked me to teach how to begin a church from scratch. My best experience has been in 1991. I was invited to go to Overland Park, Kansas, there. And I arrived there, no deaf in the Bible study in the morning. They had no deaf people come to Bible study. And that church before had been a good church. They had interpreters in every grade level, and good interpreters. So the boys and girls grew up, and they had to get deaf work, and then I arrived in the summer. They just asked me to work with them that 1 week. So what did I do? I do what you do any place you go. Began visiting the deaf and knocking on doors. Mark Kearns, he was there, and he was my chauffeur. I didn't know the city, so we got a name and address, went in, visit, knock doors. That we began on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. We invited them to a Bible class. We had 23 deaf people to show up on a Wednesday night. What did that tell me? It said, people need to knock on doors. People need to go where the deaf are. People need to invite them. I'm a hearing person, not deaf. But they came to hear me teach anyway. And so I learned something through that week of visitation in the church. After that, they asked me to write the evaluation of how to improve the work. And I wrote 2 or 3 pages of my suggestion, and we'll cover some of that in a little bit. But that they followed, and they hired Jose Abed Chuchan, deaf man from Texas, and he began to work, and Jose was able to send Mark Lowenstein on our program. He came from that work. Mark would never have listened to me, but he listened to a deaf man who is deaf, born deaf, and Mark changed and became a great preacher. He also sent Joe Kaplan. He also sent Andrew Dicely. He also sent Jesse Neal, and Jesse is here. Those 4 preachers came from that work of 1 week, and because the church there listened a little bit. So maybe that gives the introduction of why I've been asked to give this lesson. So I have maybe 5 major points, and you can add yours because all of us are different. Every church is different. Every deaf person is different. We all have different skills, different needs, but we need to meet those needs. And maybe this lesson will give some ideas. The first, most important to me through the years is, first we need to prepare the hearing church. Hearing people don't understand deafness. Hearing people think if you have an interpreter, the deaf hear exactly what you hear. Vocabulary is very different. Their understanding is different. Like when I see a deaf man from Gayette, too fast for me. I'm a hearing person. I didn't grow up with finger spelling, and I have to wrestle, and I get ideas, but I don't get what the hearing church understands. And so I think we must prepare the hearing church. They need to understand some things. First, talk to elders. Elders must be involved. It can't be just one. All the eldership need to understand some things about the deaf, need to understand the problems that come. If you're going to go to the inner city and work with people who are alcoholics, you have to know something about alcohol and addiction and how to help people quit. If you want to work in the inner city and you work with people that are prostitutes and they don't like that life, you need to have some understanding of how patient you have to be with people to quit that lifestyle. Some of you smoke. How easy it is for you to quit smoking. It's difficult. How easy it is for you to quit a sin. You and I know sin. We all have different sins. How easy it is for us to quit the sin that bothers us the most. The deaf have many difficulties, just like all hearing people, and we must have eldership that understand deafness and their culture. So you make sure they're all involved. It's not something you can begin and stop after 1 week or 1 year. It's a lifetime beginning. This church has one deaf, but it should not mean ignore all the other deaf. It means this church and the eldership and leaders must understand and be willing to step out and do the work that's necessary. Eldership must be on board. Sometimes the deaf say, elders never visit. They're cold. They're far away. I ask, did you invite elders in your home? Ask the hearing elders to come to your house. Eat with you. Let them see how you communicate. Let them see how you welcome people. And when elders are involved in your life, then it's easy for them to understand better what's going on in your life and how to meet your needs. So elderships are very important. Talk to them. You are a deaf preacher, talk to the deaf, to the hearing, to the elders, so that they understand what you're doing. And I like to have an elder in worship with the deaf, even though no interpreters. They can see singing is different. Yesterday we had a beautiful worship in the morning, beautiful worship at night. How many songs? 5, 6, 7? Go to a deaf church and see how many songs they like to lead. Look at the words of the songs. The songs that we sing, beautiful. It's a beautiful worship, but it's very difficult. The deaf worship is very different than these vocabulary words that are in the songs. It's like reading Shakespeare to the deaf. It's very difficult. Okay, so that's just understanding. Also, When I've been invited to introduce a work at different places, I ask for an opportunity to talk to the hearing church. I'm hearing, so I can talk to the hearing church. The people must be ready. The congregation must know something about the deaf. So you must prepare the hearing church. Wow, these people have working themselves to death here. What a meal last night. Wow. The organization, the plan, you see a lot of rolling up the sleeves, a lot of work, transportation in the middle of nowhere here. They're still providing a great opportunity to the deaf here. So the hearing church, the hearing people need to know something about deafness. Prepare the old women, prepare the old men, prepare the children, prepare them for this work. Okay. Something that the deaf in that the hearing church in the South may not understand. In the South, it's black and white, not get along together. I explained that deaf people do not see black and white. They see deaf or hearing. If you're deaf, my friend, if you can sign and talk, I don't care, black, white, Spanish, other country. If you're deaf, we're in the team. Deaf is a culture by itself, and it must mingle with the hearing. You must bring them in together. I really feel strongly that a deaf church needs to worship with the hearing regularly, once a month or at night, but keep the deaf program before the eyes of the hearing people. They love the signing, even though they don't understand it. They love the beauty of the singing of the interpreter. Oh, the hearing people get involved. You deaf people must bring the hearing into your lives. And that way, the hearing will support you and help you for a long time. You cannot push out the hearing. Hearing cannot push out the deaf. It's a marriage. And when you say, I do, it means for life. You don't begin a marriage and expect to quit. When you begin the deaf work, you can't expect to quit. You're beginning a marriage that's going to go on. It means you need to communicate to each other. I would urge that every church that wants deaf work should have regular training in sign language, ASL. Have it every week. Have a class, every class. Let people come and learn a little bit of sign. Include them. Teach that all the time. A class in sign language, ASL. Have a good teacher. And through that, you soon have not only one person signing, but many people can say, hi, my name is, I'm glad you're here. And have communication in the hearing church with the deaf. Very, very important. And then I believe in the beginning you must explain interpreter's role. Here in the East, there may be some strong differences in their ideas about who can interpret, who cannot. I respect the elders. What the elders say, only men, okay, that's their church, they're responsible, fine. Many churches will use women interpreters, but to have a woman stand up in the church is difficult for many hearing people in the churches of Christ. It's new to them. So I like when I go into a new place and talk to the hearing church, I talk about the role of an interpreter. The role of an interpreter is not the preacher, not the teacher, but they take the message and interpret it. I support women interpreters. We have very good men interpreters here. They're doing a wonderful job. Many churches do not have that. I think if a woman takes what's breath and give it in a good way after training, some of the best interpreters are women, and I have no objection to that, but I warn you, if you work with the elders that are against that, you honor them, respect them, take time and teach. Don't fuss, don't split the church. God hates division. So in the East, there's some churches very strong against women interpreters. Hollis and I worked with the Sunset Church over 30 years. We never used a woman interpreter in the auditorium. Why? Many of the elders, many of the people had never seen a woman stand up. very conservative church. But houses now are training women. So we respected their opinion. We used them in our classrooms. We used them in our deaf worship, separate. And it wasn't offensive. But finally, after 30 years, they let me talk to the hearing church and explain the role of an interpreter. And only a few people objected. They never talked to me. They went to the elders. The elders said, well, show me the Bible. It's wrong. And no one could, or they haven't yet. I saw one article from Fried Hardeman that had a good explanation about why they don't use a woman interpreter. That's the best I've heard. And they feel it's wrong to go in another country and use women interpreters. Most missionaries have found other countries, they get up and speak in English, and the native interpreters translate for them in Russia, Italian, whatever country they go to. Members of the church have used good and wonderful interpreters. But this article taught me that some feel that's wrong, and they don't do it in other countries, and they don't do it in this country. Fine, I respect those elders. I will work with them. That's what you have to have a relationship with the elders and know that they are responsible for the congregation. And so that takes time for you to convert. And so that's those 5 things under the role of beginning a new work. A lot of communication, must be always with love, always wanting to follow the Bible. And the elders want to follow the Bible the way they lead that church. Respect them and honor that and work with them. Before I went to Sunset, 25 years as a preacher for the deaf, I interpreted everything every time the deaf met with the hearing churches. I did the songs, the prayers, the sermons, the whole hour. Did that for 25 years until I went to Sunset, and we're training many people. And so that became solved in my mind. I see nothing wrong with a woman interpreter as long as she's interpreting well, interpreting what the speaker is saying, and the deaf love good interpreter. They get the full lesson. So very, very important under God for you deaf people and those who work with the deaf to have that relationship with the elders and respect them. They are responsible. They will lead the church and change if they feel that's appropriate. So you must honor that. God bless. Second thing, the second point, major. Start with what you have. They have one deaf man. Boy, he's good. His son is a preacher and interpreting. Wow. So it tells you a lot about that deaf man and his family. You begin where you are. Overland Park had deaf children. What did they do? They trained women interpreters in the classes, and every class had interpreting and the deaf children. It's the first and only church I've gone to where denominational people were sending their children to the Church of Christ. Most of the time, it's the denominational churches that have the good interpreters. When the Church of Christ meets the needs of the deaf you have, then people will come to that church. And so I learned from Overland Park. That's the only church I've ever met that preferred interpreting to a deaf preacher, until I met with them that one week and convinced them, you want to grow a deaf church? Hire a deaf preacher. And they did, and the church, poof. And since then, a long time, they've been working and doing good work. Up and down, like we all have in our church works. Okay, if you have deaf children, meet their needs. I'm upset with the Churches of Christ and our deaf camps. Deaf people are not bringing deaf children to the camp. They've become an old people's camp. Where are the deaf children? Oh, the thing I think caused a lot of that is when the institutions for the deaf became sending the children home on the weekends. For all my life growing up, the deaf stayed in the institutions. And all the schools for the deaf had Bible studies. They all knew about Adam. They all knew about Noah. They all knew about Abraham. They knew about Moses. They knew about Jesus. They knew about Joseph and Mary. They knew stories. because they learned it in the deaf institutions. Now those same children are going other places to their mom and dads who take them to hearing churches, and deaf children are not receiving Bible. They're going home to deaf parents that don't go to church, so a percentage of deaf people have no knowledge of the Bible. They have no knowledge anymore. And I think that's why we do not have deaf children in our churches. We don't have deaf children in our camp. That's your my fault. We need to change that. You need to be aware. You find that deaf children meet their needs. And so if you have deaf children, meet their needs and help them to grow. If you have, I want to say, mentally challenged people, we have two. We had two at Sunset Church. And they are precious people. Meet their needs. Have classes for them. Make sure they're invited. If you have lip reading people, well, meet their needs. They love things more than those who straight ASL. Begin with the deaf people you have. If one, fine. You have 2 or 3, whatever you have in your community. Meet their needs in the worship. And then that's a beginning place. Every deaf church will be different. If you're in a poor area, you're going to have a different church than if you're in a rich area. Just very different. Inner city is very different from outside in the suburbs. Meet the needs where you are. Who do you have that's deaf? Work your program around that deaf person's needs and his friends and bring them and help them. Communicate to them, whether no voice at all. That would be the best way, maybe if you have deaf people that can't lip read, they have weakness vocabulary. I'll illustrate that a little bit. You must think about that. Now, I think I'll do it right now. I need to watch my time. We have 2 men in Sunset. If they're here, I still talk about them. But 2 men. One is Luis Lopez. He's a Spanish American in this country. He never went to school. He never went to school. He never saw a wedding. He never saw a funeral that he could understand what's going on. But he met Tom Ramey. Tom Ramey works with the Spanish people that have very low vocabulary, no knowledge, and he teaches in pictures. He teaches in very simple way. And the church, can Luis preach to a hearing or a deaf educated class and inspire them and lead them? He can't read and write a sentence, but he has a heart open for people. When he leads prayer, you know he loves people. He loves God. He loves what he learned from Tom. And so he is very good to work with Spanish, limited, English, deaf. And Tom sent him to school. I have Matt Giddem, who is Sikkim, who is there, a Gallaudet worker. He worked at Gallaudet for 9 years. His language is up here. We have a deaf man from Mexico there in school. His level is very here. But we have Luis. His vocabulary is very limited. Look at a piece of paper, a sentence, I don't know. You sign it, answers the questions. So you need to meet the needs of the people you have. So another man is Daniel Torres. He's from Fort Worth, 30 miles apart. He worked with the church at inner city. The church began, because the people in the city began to invite prostitutes in. Prostitutes would come in and said, "How can you help me?" And they had a heart open, and they began to work with them. And that church, 1,500 people. Maybe you remember the doctor that went to Africa and got Ebola and almost died. He's an elder of the church there. He's a member of that church. Wow, work in the inner city. I can't get close to those people. This bothers me if I'm going to go to the inner city. It shuts off people. Preacher, not mine. I know that. But Daniel can go into that community, and that church loves Daniel. They support him to go to school. And he is so different. He's a street man. He's very kind, very smart, like Louis, very, very smart, but language difficulty. And they are changing. They are growing in the school. But I could recommend them and graduate them and recommend them to their home churches. I would not invite them to this church to become a preacher. It would not work. But they will work in their area. So meet the needs of the people that you have in your church. That's where you begin from scratch. What do you have? Where do you live? What's around you? Meet the needs of those people. And you bring them, stay with them, love them, and continue with them. You can't forget them. Now when you get a church that the rich and the poor, I had that in Indianapolis. When we went to Indianapolis, it was a church that had opportunity. I preached for 6 months. We had never grown. Hollis started the church from scratch, and it went up to about 30, 35. I went there. Nobody came. Nobody to be baptized. I just taught. We had Leander Moore come for a gospel meeting, and in 2 weeks we baptized for 30 people. In the church, wow. I learned a lot that week. And that church grew after that, so that church soon had 7 men in the church that were preaching all around. One is here. I don't see him right now, but one is Christine, and Nancy, two widow ladies are here. 2 of their husbands died of the 7. But the son you will meet after a while, Dennis Wilson, he is a son of those 7 men. And when I see him teach, it's like a deaf man teaching. Wow. He communicates like a deaf man. He grew up in the deaf church. Hearing man, but he's deaf in heart and mind. Well-trained, good counselor, good preacher, good teacher. Loves the deaf. I was afraid. He came, I can help you. My eyes opened, and I saw, wow, wonderful man. Okay, you need to prepare where you are. Okay. 3rd point, you need to teach the Bible. Teach the Bible. That's why I'm at Sunset. I love the Old Testament, and I teach the Bible. The deaf, like the hearing, do not know the kings. The deaf, like the hearing, never have read the prophets. The deaf, like many hearing people, do not study the Psalms and Ecclesiastes, Proverbs. I confess I don't teach those 5 poetry books. I teach every other book in the Old Testament word by word. And it's new to the deaf, like it's new to the hearing. You come this afternoon, I'll talk about how I teach the deaf in the Old Testament. I want to encourage you, don't ignore any book. Every book in the Bible is your favorite when you teach it. They ask me, what's your favorite? What am I teaching now? Oh, next fall will be Revelation, so that's my favorite book, even though it's difficult. But it has a good message, and the deaf need to hear that will defend them from falling into some false teaching that we see on TV and around us in denominational churches. Denominational people don't know the prophets. They have not heard or read the prophets well, or they would understand Revelation in a different way. The prophets prepare you for reading that book. So I used to say, teach the Bible, the whole. Don't Acts. Beautiful. New Testament, beautiful. Every book is beautiful. Don't ignore any, but don't ignore the Old Testament. Read it and teach it. Read it and teach it. Every word in Kings. Every word in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Read it. And if you don't know, study it and teach. Very, very important, I think, to proper understanding. Hosea in 4:6, he said, My people are destroyed. Why? No knowledge. No knowledge. Hebrew people, God's people, were destroyed because they didn't know God's word. Whose fault? The priest. Whose fault? People did not listen. They did not learn. They were God's people. And God became so angry with his people, he destroyed 10 tribes, scattered them. The south, look, learned no lesson. And they were destroyed and carried in captivity for 70 years. Because God promised they would protect them and bring Jesus into the world, he brought them back, and Jesus came back, and the Hebrew people came back, and Jesus was born like scheduled according to God's plan. Wow, the Old Testament explains that. Deaf people, your churches will not grow if you don't know the word. They will not grow properly. Do we want this deaf church to be like all the other deaf churches and other churches? They are fellowships. Fellowship is like pleasure places. Love being around the deaf. Love singing with them. Love. The deaf need to be teaching the word. The preacher need to teach what the word says. Life need to be changing. This man yesterday said, let us be light. And he challenged the church last night, here am I, send me. We need to be in the church for worship, but we need to be in the church to teach what God wants. And if we don't know God's word, we will not live, we will not change, will not become what God wants us to become. So that means you and I are here in this workshop, the best teachers, the best preachers here. Preach the word, teach the word, study the word, take time to know the word, and grow yourself. But teach the word. That is what saves you. It's not eating together. It's not seeing movies together. It's not playing ball together. Those are good things. Picnics. I love all those. The fellowship thing. You must teach the Bible. That's the only thing that separates from the lost and the saved. So teach it, teach it, teach it. Study yourself. Challenge. If you want your deaf preachers to improve in the Bible knowledge, send them to Sunset. 2 or 3 years there, they'll come out with a lot of knowledge. All? Fred Orr told me, I have to learn a lot of things you're not teach me. I keep learning. Wow. In 3 years, we get you started. But after you leave, that's when you teach is when you learn. The teacher knows better than the people that, I've sat there, finished, good lesson. What did you say last week? I don't know. They go, we enjoy the time, but if you teach, you don't forget. If you teach others, you grow. You become strong in faith when you're teaching other people. That's why, here am I, send me. I need to teach. You need to teach. You need to encourage the deaf. Argue with them. Teach them. Then the deaf will come. I want to give, this fourth thing is a little bit different. The fourth point, I think, you need to meet the needs of the deaf community. You have deaf people that are poor. They need help with finances. You have deaf people that are starving. What do? You have deaf people that are sick. What do? You have deaf people that are fussing with the police, fussing with the court. What do? You have to meet the needs, help the deaf. Example, most of you know about Ethiopia. You know that the church wanted to begin preaching there, and they said, you must do something for this country. So a long time ago, in the 1960s, Church of Christ accepted the challenge to train deaf people in Ethiopia. You know what happened? They have 5 major deaf schools, and about 10 or 15 other smaller deaf schools, all taught by members of the Churches of Christ. The whole country deaf. It's like going to Mexico and all the people there are Catholic. Why? The Catholic Church went into deaf schools and they control everything. Everything is Catholic there. In Ethiopia, all deaf people who have any education are taught in the churches of Christ. That began the work as missionaries there. The Ethiopia church, the whole country, deaf people are taught by members of the church. Carl Moore is part of a group that's gone to Kenya. What do they do? Deaf. No parents. Decided to set up an orphanage. And in the orphanage, they teach them how to work, how to learn, how to support themselves. And the deaf now, they filled that orphanage quickly, 1-2 years. 40 deaf people in that. Now they want a second one, because when you meet the needs, then the deaf. Recently, Dennis and others sent Amers to Honduras. They began to work with the deaf there. And here's hearing people, had a deaf son, no place to learn anything. They brought him to church, and they began to pay attention to that deaf boy, and the two, mom and dad, fell in love with Christ and become members of the church. When you pay attention, meet the needs of the deaf, then the hearing people will follow them. The church will grow. So must provide a service. You just can't be there for pleasing yourself. The church needs to work in the deaf community. How do you do that? Right now, the best way for your young men and women to become interpreters, become professional interpreters and help interpret. That's good. Become teachers of the deaf. Wow. One of our students at Sunset became the top man in all special ed in all of Lubbock. He's retired now. Paul Wheeler is the name, but wow. He served the community as the deaf teacher of the deaf. We need to meet the needs of the deaf in your place, so find out what you can do. If you have good Christian counselors, learn to use an interpreter. So you say, we will counsel deaf. If you have to go through an interpreter, that's not the best, but it's better than nothing. But provide financial counseling, provide religious counseling, provide how to help teenagers quit pot or whatever they're using. Deaf people have children in trouble. Deaf children in trouble, they need counseling. So maybe your church has good people in it that can give us service, meet the needs of the deaf community. Don't let the deaf Church of Christ, they're against women, they're against music, they're against. Instead, they all say, the Church of Christ helps people. They meet the needs of people. They help clothe the people. They help financially. They help many different ways. That is what we ought to be known for. So find a way for your deaf church, your deaf program, to meet the needs of the deaf community. Then I believe it will grow. People respond to that. Wish we had more hearing people, but maybe you can suggest this. I've had success with the churches I work with full time. My wife became what I call a church mother for children of the deaf. Church mothers are special. They are people that raise their children, and they will bring in other people's children and teach them how to worship in the church. Children don't know. If they've never been, they're all over the place. Can a deaf mom and dad watch? Hearing can, but the deaf cannot do both. Not easily. A few very successful. But most of the time, the children of the deaf are all over the place if the deaf are paying attention to the lesson. I suggest begin to build some special women who will be willing to accept the children of people that cannot watch, and it allows your mothers and fathers to pay attention to the lessons if they're deaf. Church mothers will help you tremendously. It's a lot of work. Or grandma, I'm tired of raising mine, no more. So you find a few. And my first wife was excellent in that. And we had an elder's wife that helped that, and that helped our church in California. More than in Indianapolis, when I was there, they didn't have children. They were all young, married people. And I moved away, and all their children grew up, and I didn't associate with them very much. Hollis did that, in the deaf camps here in Alabama. But I suggest look into how to help deaf people with children to worship. Let their hearing children, even their deaf children. If they're deaf, you may have a special class for them during the worship so that the deaf parents can watch and work a program that allows them to appreciate what's going on. A mother is frustrated. They can't hear the lesson. The deaf cannot. That's why I make my outline. I'll give to you later because you can't make notes, but you can take home and read this and then study yourself and add to it and change and with your experience what's best and then teach your church. Okay. Need to provide transportation. Transportation, very important. Many old deaf cannot drive anymore. Many young deaf are poor and they can't get there. So provide transportation. My last point, I have to hurry. I strongly support separate service for the deaf. Hearing, yesterday, beautiful. I think that's a wonderful experience. But the deaf will not get the same lesson. Hearing people think that's true. Why do teachers give a test in school? Everybody hears the same lesson. He teaches, but everybody do not understand the same. I taught it clear. 0, 30, 99, 85. What does that tell me? Not getting what I'm saying. My fault, I'm the teacher. Or their fault, like we do on Sunday. Good sermon, go home, same. Good sermon, go home, we don't change. After yesterday, hopefully you and I are looking, am I the light? Hopefully we're saying, here am I, send me. Whew, that's hard work. You think it's easy, this workshop? Look how many people worked last night. How much food was there? That happened, just easy. Plan and working. A lot of people work 24/7 for this workshop. The same thing in any church. It requires some work. You need to be a worker. Here am I, send me. You need a deaf preacher, that's number one. Try for that. If he's not trained, send him to Sunset. We'll train him. Let him go to any other place where he can learn the Bible. That's good. But he must learn the Bible so he can teach the whole Bible. But encourage him as much as you can, a deaf preacher. If you can't get a deaf preacher, take what's left, Bob or Hollis. We've done this for 50, 60 years, and the church is growing, and we've met our problem, but some hearing people will come into the deaf work, and we've been blessed through that. But first, if you want a deaf church to grow, have a deaf preacher who loves and teaches the Bible and teaches it well. Interpreter, that's third. You can't get a deaf man, you can't get a hearing man, use your good interpreters. And a good interpreter will help. People will come, the church will not grow fast. But you have a deaf preacher who's out there visiting, knocking on doors, visiting, teaching the Bible, then the church can begin to grow. Ask Jess Neal. He's back here, beard, ugly man. But Overland Park, he's gone there. Whew. That church is very different. Very different. He is the only one I know that has young 20 and 30-year-olds going to the church. 20 and 30 years old. Wow, they're doing something right? Talk to him and find out. Wow, find out what they're doing and learn. But what I'm seeing, all the preachers I know are like me, gray, getting old. We need to have some young men that meet the needs of young people, that know the computers and know how to use that. I didn't even put on I forgot all about that. Somebody's working up there for me. Okay, that's the three, deaf preacher, then hearing man, then the third interpreter. Okay, my time has passed. My conclusion. The hearing church needs to be part of the deaf work. Deaf people are as different as hearing people. The whole Bible needs to be taught in ASL. Meeting the needs of the deaf community draws the deaf to Christ. And the deaf love to be leaders. It's difficult for the deaf to lead in the hearing church. The prayers, the Lord's Supper, the talks. It's very difficult. But in a deaf congregation, the deaf do everything, and it's always better. They meet the needs. So that's a very important thing. May God bless us in our work. I'll give out the papers now. God be with you.